Staff Sergeant James Connor was just trying to have breakfast at his local diner. A decorated veteran with 3 tours in Fallujah, he never expected to be turned away because of his service dog and what the manager called his concerning behavior. But that's exactly what happened this morning in downtown Springfield. As Connor stood there, the weight of his PTSD and the sting of rejection heavy on his shoulders, his phone buzzed. One text message. That's all it took. His former unit, still, stationed nearby, hadn't forgotten the brotherhood forged in combat. Within minutes, they would show this diner what true loyalty means. What happened next would not only change the diner's policy forever, but touch millions of hearts across America. How did 35 Marines in full-dress uniform turn a moment of discrimination into a viral sensation of hope? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Purple Heart Medal caught the morning light as James Connor adjusted it on his dress uniform, now reserved for special occasions in the back of his closet. 3 years since his last tour, and some mornings the weight of it still felt as heavy as the day he received it. Atlas, his German shepherd service dog, sat watching him with patient eyes, already wearing his own vest, a symbol of their partnership and Connor's ongoing journey. "What do you think, boy?" Connor's voice was soft, practiced from years of managing its volume after sudden noises would make him jump. "Looking sharp enough for another day?" Atlas's tail thumped against the hardwood floor, their morning ritual complete. The apartment wasn't much, but it was home. A small one-bedroom on the quieter side of Springfield, where the neighbors mostly kept to themselves. Connor had chosen it carefully. Corner unit, clear sightlines to the street, minimal foot traffic. The walls were mostly bare, except for his unit photos and a carefully preserved flag in a shadow box. 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines, the men who'd become his second family through 3 tours in Fallujah. Every morning followed the same routine. Up at 0500, just like in the Corps. 20 minutes of breathing exercises that his therapist insisted would help. Sometimes they did. Atlas would rest his head on Connor's lap during these moments, the dog's steady presence anchoring him to the present when memories threatened to pull him back. The morning run came next. 5 miles through Wilson Park before the crowds arrived. Atlas matched his pace perfectly, both of them moving with purpose, but not urgency. It had taken months of training for Connor to learn the difference. The park offered wide paths and clear lines of sight, essential features that his VA counselor called environmental management, but that Connor simply thought of as staying ready. Back home, shower, then breakfast, usually oatmeal with protein powder, a habit from deployment he never shook. But today was different. Today marked 3 years since he'd left the service, and he'd promised his therapist he'd try something new. The local diner, just 3 blocks away, had been on his list of places to try for months. Ready for an adventure, buddy? Connor clipped Atlas's leash to his service vest. The dog's ears perked forward, always alert, always ready to support. Sometimes Connor wondered who was really helping whom. His phone buzzed. A message from Martinez, his old squad leader now working as a drill instructor at the base 30 miles north. "Hey brother, still on for the BBQ this weekend? The guys miss your ugly mug." Connor smiled, typing back a quick affirmative. His unit had refused to let him drift away after discharge, even when he'd tried. Especially when he'd tried. They'd been there through the worst of his adjustment, the nights when the memories were too loud, the days when leaving the apartment felt impossible. The medal on his dress uniform caught the light again as he passed the closet. 3 years ago, it had meant everything. Now it was just a reminder, both of what he'd lost and what he'd gained. The citation read, "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action," but it couldn't capture the cost of that gallantry, the nightmares, the hypervigilance, the way loud noises could send him right back to that street in Fallujah. Atlas nudged his hand, bringing him back to the present. The dog had an uncanny sense for when Connor's thoughts started to spiral. 3 years of training together, and they moved like a single unit. When Connor's breathing quickened, Atlas would press against his leg. When the memories got too close, a gentle paw would tap his knee. They'd learned each other's rhythms, formed a bond as strong as any he'd known in the Corps. The morning sun was climbing higher as they stepped outside. Connor scanned the street, old habits, before setting off toward the diner. A few early joggers nodded as they passed. An elderly man across the street raised his coffee cup in greeting, small gestures that meant more than they knew, each one a thread connecting him back to the civilian world he sometimes still felt separate from. "Just breakfast," he reminded himself, Atlas padding steadily beside him. One step at a time, the diner's neon sign came into view, its promise of home cooking glowing against the morning sky. Connor took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and moved forward, just like he'd been trained, just like he'd trained others. Some battles were fought in distant lands. Others, he was learning, happened every day on quiet streets back home. The bell above the diner door chimed as Connor and Atlas entered. The smell of coffee and bacon filled the air, mixing with the familiar sounds of plates clinking and morning conversation. Connor did what he always did first, scanned the room, noted the exits, chose a seat with his back to the wall. Atlas settled seamlessly beside his chair, perfectly positioned to both help and stay out of the way. A few early morning regulars glanced their way, but most returned to their newspapers and phones. An elderly couple at the next table smiled warmly. The woman reached down as if to pet Atlas, then caught herself noticing his service vest. "Thank you for your service," she said instead, her voice gentle. Connor nodded, grateful for both the acknowledgement and her restraint with Atlas. The relative calm lasted exactly 3 minutes. "Sir, you can't have that dog in here." The manager appeared beside their table, his voice sharp enough to make Connor's hand tighten on his coffee cup. "This is a restaurant. Health codes." Connor took a measured breath, just like he'd practiced. "He's a service dog," he explained, gesturing to Atlas's clearly marked vest. "Under the ADA. "I don't care what kind of dog it is." The manager cut him off, his voice rising. "We've had problems with people claiming their pets are service animals. I can't risk it. And frankly," he glanced around the diner, lowering his voice, "your behavior is concerning our other customers." Connor felt his chest tighten. "My behavior? The way you came in, checking everything, sitting like you're expecting trouble. It's making people uncomfortable." The elderly woman from the next table spoke up. "He's doing nothing wrong, Frank. The dog is beautifully behaved." But the manager, Frank, was already shaking his head. "I have the right to refuse service to anyone." He pointed to a sign. On the wall, its letters bold and black. "If you're going to be difficult about this—" "I'm not being difficult." Connor's voice was controlled, level, the same tone he'd used to keep his unit calm in tense situations. "I'm a veteran with a licensed service dog, and I'm trying to have breakfast." A few more customers were watching now. Connor could feel their eyes, hear their whispered conversations. His pulse quickened. Atlas pressed against his leg, a steady reminder to stay grounded. "Look," Frank said, "I appreciate your service and all that, but what?" The words came out sharper than Connor intended. He could feel it starting, the tightness in his chest, the hyper-awareness of every movement, every sound. Atlas responded immediately, placing his head on Connor's lap. But the manager took a step back. "See, this is exactly what I mean. You're agitated. It's disrupting my business." The elderly couple was openly protesting now. A younger man at the counter had stood up, phone in hand, but Connor barely registered them. The room felt too bright, too loud. Images flickered at the edges of his vision. Different faces, different voices, a different kind of tension. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Connor stood slowly, carefully. Atlas rose with him, a steady presence at his side. The dog's training was impeccable. He maintained perfect heel position while simultaneously providing the grounding pressure that helped keep the flashbacks at bay. "This isn't right," someone said from across the room. "It's illegal," said Another voice, but Connor was already moving toward the door, Atlas matching his pace exactly. His hands were steady as he pushed the door open, the same steadiness he'd maintained while treating wounded under fire, the same steadiness that had kept his unit alive through 3 tours. Outside, the morning sun felt too bright. Connor's phone buzzed in his pocket, probably Martinez checking about the weekend, but he couldn't answer yet. Not until his breathing steadied. Not until the memories of other confrontations, other moments of feeling cornered, faded back. Where they belonged. Atlas pressed against his leg, and Connor found himself automatically scratching behind the dog's ears. The familiar gesture helped, gave him something to focus on besides the anger and humiliation burning in his chest. A young woman hurried out of the diner behind them. "Sir, I got it all on video. What they did, it's not okay. Do you want me to post it?" Connor looked at her phone, then back at the diner's windows where faces watched. His training said to minimize conflict, to withdraw and regroup. But something else. Something that remembered every brother and sister in arms who'd faced similar treatment, made him reach for his own phone. With fingers that no longer shook, he opened his unit's group chat. For 3 years, he'd resisted sharing his struggles, determined to handle things alone. But maybe, he thought as he began typing, some battles weren't meant to be fought alone. Connor's thumbs hovered over his phone screen. 3 years of keeping his struggles private, of insisting he could handle civilian life on his own. And now here he was, about to break that self-imposed silence. Atlas watched him steadily, still, providing that calming pressure against his leg. "Just got denied service at Murphy's Diner," he typed, then paused. They didn't want Atlas inside, said my behavior was concerning. He hit send before he could second-guess himself. The response was immediate. 3 dots appeared as multiple people started typing at once. Martinez was first. "What the actual hell? Where are you right now?" Then Rodriguez. "That's the place on 5th. Stay put. I'm 10 minutes out." More messages flooded in, each one carrying the rapid-fire efficiency of military communication. "Still got my dress blues pressed. Just saying. On base. Can grab 12 guys. From the barracks. Let's show them what Marine Corps support looks like. Anyone close enough to film this?" Connor found himself smiling despite the lingering tension. The messages kept coming, carrying the same urgency they'd once used to coordinate operations. Only this time, they were planning something very different. A memory surfaced, Fallujah 2019. Their unit pinned down, ammunition running low. No one had hesitated then, every Marine moving as one to support their brothers. The same energy crackled through the group chat now. Martinez took charge. "Just like old times. Listen up. Anyone within 30 miles, get your dress blues on. We meet at the park across from Murphy's in 45. Connor, you good with this?" Connor's hand dropped to Atlas's head, drawing strength from the dog's unwavering presence. "Yeah," he typed. "I'm good. Tracking everyone's location," Rodriguez added. "Got at least 20 confirmed. More incoming." Someone shared a screenshot of the ADA service dog regulations. Another posted the diner's public review page. The operation was taking shape with military precision. "Remember," Martinez messaged, "this is a peaceful demonstration. We're Marines. We do this with dignity." The words triggered another flashback. Martinez saying something similar before a particularly tense patrol. "Dignity under fire," he'd called it then. Different context now, but the principle held. Connor's phone buzzed with private messages too. Brothers checking if he was really okay, offering to talk, sharing their own stories of difficult transitions. The wall he'd built between his military and civilian lives was crumbling, and surprisingly, that felt right. "Got media contacts," hosted Wilson, now a local journalist. "They'll want this story. You okay with that, Connor?" He thought about other veterans, other service dogs, other quiet battles being fought in diners and stores across the country. "Yeah," he replied. "Let's make it count." The elderly couple from the diner emerged, spotted him still standing there. "Young man!" the woman called out. "We're so sorry about what happened. We've been coming here for 20 years, but never again after this." Connor nodded his thanks, watching as she took a photo of Atlas's service vest and the diner's sign. "Posting this on Facebook," she announced. "My grandson's a Marine too." His phone kept buzzing. The chat was coordinating transportation, timing, media presence. Someone had even created a hashtag. Through it all, Connor felt something shifting inside him. The isolation of the past 3 years giving way to something stronger. A new message from Martinez. "Almost there, brother, like old times." Connor looked down at Atlas, then back at the diner where the manager was now anxiously watching through the window. "Yeah," he typed back, "like old times, but better." The late morning sun caught his service dog's vest, the words, "Working dog, do not pet," clear and proud. Soon that same sun would glint off dozens of dress blue uniforms, marking another kind of service, another kind of stand. Rodriguez's final message summed it up. "Marines take care of their own. Always have. Always will. See you in 15, brother." Connor straightened his shoulders, a familiar calm settling over him. This wasn't the kind of battle he'd been trained for, but in many ways, it was more important. Atlas sensed the change in his posture and sat up straighter too, both of them. Ready. They had 45 minutes to wait, but Connor knew from experience the Marines were probably already ahead of schedule. They arrived exactly how Connor remembered them, ahead of schedule and combat ready, even if this morning's mission required dress blues instead of tactical gear. The park across from Murphy's Diner became an impromptu staging area with Marines, appearing in ones and twos, each in immaculate uniform, each moving with purpose. Martinez was first naturally. He pulled up in his truck, dress blues pristine, ribbons aligned perfectly. The sight of him transported Connor back to their last formation together, but Atlas's steady presence kept him grounded in the present. "Looking sharp, Staff Sergeant." Martinez grinned, but his eyes were serious as they took in Connor's stance, the way Atlas pressed against his leg. 3 years as his squad leader had taught Martinez to read the signs. "You good with this, brother?" "We can handle it different if you need." Connor straightened. "I'm good. This isn't just about me anymore." More vehicles arrived. Rodriguez brought 3 junior Marines from the base. Wilson showed up with his press contacts already on speed dial. The unit's old flag appeared. Technically, against regulations to display it unofficially, but some rules mattered less than others today. They gathered in a loose circle, the formation familiar even after years apart. Atlas watched them curiously, sensing the energy but maintaining his trained composure. Someone had brought extra water for him, remembering Connor's briefings about service dogs on duty. "Listen up," Martinez called out, his voice carrying the same authority it had in combat. "This is a peaceful demonstration. We're here to make a point, not start a fight. Our presence alone will say everything that needs saying." The Marines nodded, faces serious. They understood the weight of what they were doing. Dress blues weren't just a uniform, they were a statement. Each ribbon, each medal told a story of service and sacrifice. Today, those stories would speak louder than words. "Connor," Rodriguez stepped forward. "We've got media coming. Local news, maybe national if this picks up. You okay being the face of this?" Connor looked at the diner where more customers had gathered at the windows to watch. The manager was on his phone, gesturing frantically. "Yeah," he said. "If it helps other vets, other service dogs." "Yeah." Wilson, the journalist, was coordinating with his contacts. Stories already spreading on social media. That couple from inside posted about it. We're trending locally. More Marines arrived. Some Connor recognized. Others were new to the unit, but all wore the same expression of determined support. Few brought their own stories, of family members with PTSD, of friends with service dogs, of quiet battles fought far from any battlefield. They fell into formation naturally, muscle memory taking over. Atlas watched them align with military precision, his training keeping him focused despite the growing crowd of onlookers gathering across the street. "Remember," Martinez addressed them again. "We're Marines. Everything by the book. We walk in, we take our seats, we order breakfast. No confrontation unless they force it. Let our presence make the statement." A young Marine, couldn't have been more than 20, raised his hand. "Sir, what if they refuse to serve us too?" Martinez smiled grimly. "Then we stand our ground, with dignity, like we were trained." They did a final uniform check, medals aligned, covers positioned perfectly, shoes shined to mirror finish. The sun was higher now, catching on brass and gold, making the assembled Marines shine like something out of a recruitment poster. Connor felt a familiar calm settle over him, the same focus he'd known in combat. Atlas picked up on it, his posture, alerting to Connor's shift in energy, but maintaining his trained composure. "Time check," Martinez called out. "Local news is 2 minutes out," Wilson reported. "Social media's blowing up," Rodriguez added, checking his phone. "People are heading this way to support." Connor looked at his assembled unit. 35. Marines in dress blues, ready to fight a different kind of battle. They'd come without hesitation, without question, bringing the same dedication they'd shown in combat to this morning's mission of justice and dignity. The diner's morning rush was in full swing now. Through the windows, Connor could see the manager still on his phone, could see customers pointing their way. The elderly couple had come outside to stand with them, the woman now holding a small sign that read, "Support our veterans." Martinez checked his watch. "Formation in 2. Remember, we're Marines. Everything we do sets an example." Atlas pressed against Connor's leg one more time, a reminder of why they were here. Connor reached down to scratch behind his ears, a gesture of gratitude for the partner who'd helped him navigate civilian life, who'd been there through the nightmares and flashbacks, who'd given him back his independence. "Ready?" Martinez asked. Quietly. Connor nodded, feeling the weight of his brother's presence behind him, the strength of Atlas beside him. Some battles were fought with weapons, others he was learning were fought with unity, dignity, and the unbreakable bonds of brotherhood. "Ready?" he confirmed and meant it. They moved as one, 35 Marines in dress blues crossing the street with measured steps. No cadence called, no commands given, none were needed. Years of training made their movements precise, deliberate, almost ceremonial. Connor and Atlas led the formation, the service dog matching his pace perfectly. Phones emerged from the growing crowd of onlookers, recording the scene. The morning sun caught on brass buttons and medals, on polished shoes and grave expressions. Traffic slowed, then stopped. A delivery truck driver stepped out of his cab, hand moving to his heart as he recognized what he was witnessing. The bell above the diner door chimed as Connor entered first, Atlas steady beside him. The breakfast crowd fell silent, conversations dying mid-sentence. Forks paused halfway to mouths. The manager, Frank, stood frozen behind the counter, phone still in hand, as Marine after Marine filed in. They moved with quiet efficiency, taking positions throughout the diner. Some stood along the walls, others filled empty seats and booths. No words were spoken, none were necessary. The message was clear in every pressed uniform, every combat ribbon, every serious face. A young waitress dropped her coffee pot. The sound made Connor tense, but Atlas pressed against his leg, grounding him. Martinez stepped forward, retrieving the pot with practiced grace. "Ma'am," he said, voice carrying in the silence. "Allow me." He handed it back to her with a small bow that made her flush. Through the windows, more people gathered. Someone had called the local news. A van with WKPX lettering pulled up, a reporter and cameraman hustling out. Inside, the manager's phone kept ringing, but he seemed unable to move. Connor walked to the counter, the same spot he'd stood earlier. This time Atlas wasn't his only backup. The presence of his unit filled the space behind him like a physical force. "Table 436, he said quietly. "My service dog is welcome under ADA regulations. Would you like to see the documentation?" Frank's face had gone pale. He looked past Connor at the sea of dress blues, at the medals and ribbons that told stories of sacrifice and service. Through the windows, camera flashes sparked like distant artillery. A child in a corner booth tugged his mother's sleeve. "Mom," he whispered loud in the silence, "are they real Marines?" "Yes, honey," she answered, her voice thick. "They're real heroes." Rodriguez, ever practical, had begun rearranging tables with smooth efficiency, creating space for the unit to sit together. Other customers shifted to help, some openly wiping tears. The elderly couple from earlier had followed them back inside, the woman now documenting everything on her phone. I need to call the owner," Frank managed. Martinez stepped forward, his combat ribbons catching the light. "Sir, that's a good idea. While you do that, we'll have 36 coffees to start. Our brother and his service dog will sit with us as is their right. We'll wait while you make your call." The young waitress had found her courage. "I'll get the coffee," she said, then added with a glare at her manager, "Right away." More press had arrived outside. Through the windows, Connor could see local business owners emerging from their shops, drawn by the commotion. The crowd on the sidewalk had grown, many with phones raised, capturing the scene. "Your unit?" An older man at the counter asked Connor softly, his own veteran status clear in the way he carried himself. "Yes, sir." "Damn fine showing, son," the man said, standing to shake Connor's hand. "Damn fine." Atlas sat perfectly at attention, his training impeccable even amid the growing energy in the room. A few seats away, a young woman was live-streaming the scene, her voice thick with emotion as she described what was happening. "This is what brotherhood looks like," she was saying. "This is what it means to stand up for what's right." The Marines remained at parade rest, their presence transforming the humble diner into something approaching sacred ground. Each ribbon, each medal caught the morning light, bronze stars, purple hearts, combat action ribbons, silent testimony to battles fought far away, and now battles fought here at home. The manager's phone call ended. He stood for a moment, looking at his shoes, then at the assembled Marines, then finally at Connor and Atlas. The diner held its breath, watching history unfold in real time as Frank took his first step toward making things right. Frank cleared his throat twice before speaking. The diner remained silent, the only sounds the gentle clink of coffee cups as the young waitress continued her rounds, serving Marines with trembling hands and teary smiles. "The owner," Frank started, then paused to clear his throat again. "The owner would like to apologize personally. She's on her way here now." Martinez nodded, maintaining his parade rest stance. "We'll wait, sir." The atmosphere in the diner had transformed. What had begun as a confrontation was becoming something else, a moment of recognition, of understanding. The customers who had witnessed Connor's earlier rejection now sat in uncomfortable silence, some unable to meet the eyes of the Marines standing near them. Through the windows, the crowd outside had grown larger. Local news crews jockeyed for position, their cameras capturing every moment. Someone had brought her American flag, holding it high. Another person held a sign hastily made on cardboard, "Support our veterans." Connor felt Atlas shift slightly against his leg, a subtle reminder that even in this charged moment his partner was focused on his needs. The dog's training remained impeccable, his calm presence a stark contrast to the earlier accusations of being disruptive. The bell above the door chimed again. A woman in her 60s hurried in, slightly out of breath, her face etched with concern. Her name tag read, "Helen Murphy," the owner. "I came as soon as I heard," she said, moving directly to Connor. Her eyes took in his service dog, the assembled Marines, the growing media presence outside. "Staff Sergeant Connor, I want to apologize personally for how you were treated in my establishment." Before Connor could respond, she turned to address the entire diner. "My father was a Marine, Guadalcanal." Her voice carried clearly through the hushed space. "He came home with what they called shell shock back then. Today we know it as PTSD. She paused, composing herself. If he were here today, he would be ashamed of how we treated one of our own. The silence deepened. Outside, cameras pressed against the windows, capturing every word. "Ma'am," Connor said quietly, "I appreciate that, but this isn't just about me." He gestured to Atlas, steady at his side. "It's about every veteran with a service dog, every person trying to rebuild their life after service, every battle we fight back home." Martinez stepped forward, his ribbons catching the light. "Mrs. Murphy, we're not here to cause trouble. We're here because Marines take care of their own, always have, always will." Helen nodded, tears visible in her eyes. "Which is why, effective immediately, we're implementing a new policy." She turned to Frank, who seemed to shrink under her gaze. "All service animals are welcome here, no questions asked, and all veterans eat at a discount." She reached for a framed sign on the wall, the right to refuse service notice that had started everything. With deliberate movements, she took it down. "Furthermore," she continued, "my staff will undergo proper training about service animals and veteran support." She looked directly at Frank. "All of my staff." The young waitress, who had been watching while holding her coffee pot like a lifeline, suddenly spoke up. "Mrs. Murphy, I'd like to volunteer to coordinate that training. My brother's in the army, and she straightened her shoulders. This can't happen again, not here." Someone in the diner started to applaud. The sound spread, building like a wave, spilling out onto the street where the crowd joined in. Atlas remained perfectly still, but his ears perked forward, alert but calm. Through the windows, Connor could see more veterans arriving, some in uniform, others wearing hats and patches that marked their service. The impromptu gathering was becoming something larger, a statement, a movement, a moment of change. Helen turned back to Connor, her eyes now steady on his. "Staff Sergeant, would you and your unit do us the honor of breakfast? On the house, of course." She smiled slightly. "Though we might need a few minutes to cook up enough eggs for a platoon." The tension in the room broke, replaced by something warmer. Marines began to smile, customers relaxed, and Frank, looking both chastened and relieved, retreated to the kitchen to start what would surely be the most important breakfast service of his career. Connor looked at Martinez, who nodded, almost imperceptibly. This was how change happened sometimes, not through violence or anger, but through standing together, through quiet dignity and the unshakable bonds of brotherhood. "Thank you, ma'am," Connor said. "We'd be honored." He paused, then added softly, "Your father would be proud today." Helen wiped her eyes quickly, then straightened her shoulders in an unconsciously military posture. "No, Staff Sergeant. Thank you, all of you, for your service, your sacrifice, and," she gestured to the scene around them, "for this lesson in dignity." Outside, the morning sun climbed higher, its light filling the diner, glinting off medals and brass, illuminating a moment of transformation that would soon spread far beyond these walls. The next hour transformed Murphy's diner into something extraordinary. Tables were pushed together to create one long line down the center of the restaurant, reminiscent of a military mess hall. Marines sat shoulder to shoulder, their dress blues, a sharp contrast to the casual breakfast crowd, while Atlas maintained his vigilant post beside Connor. The kitchen staff worked double time, pumping out plates of eggs, bacon, and pancakes with almost military precision. Frank, perhaps seeking redemption, personally delivered coffee to every Marine, his earlier hostility replaced by quiet humility. "Keep 'em coming," Helen called to the kitchen, beaming, as she watched her diner fill with conversation and cautious laughter. She'd pinned up a handwritten sign in the window, "Service animals welcome. Veterans discount every day." Outside, the crowd had evolved into an impromptu gathering. Local veterans who'd seen the news continued to arrive, forming small groups on the sidewalk, sharing their own stories. A Vietnam vet with a walker stood talking to a young woman in a National Guard uniform. A retired K-9 handler discussed service, dog training with a curious family. Inside, Connor watched it all unfold, Atlas's steady presence keeping him grounded. The dog's behavior was a silent rebuke to the earlier accusations. Perfectly positioned, alertly calm, the very model of a service animal. "Your boy's got better manners than half my Marines," Martinez joked, sliding into the seat across from Connor. His expression turned serious. "You okay with all this, brother?" Connor looked around the diner. The young waitress was showing pictures of her Army brother to a group of Marines. Helen was deep in conversation with two veteran customers about setting up a monthly support group meeting in the diner's back room. Even Frank was engaged, earnestly taking notes as a service dog trainer explained ADA regulations. "Yeah," Connor replied. "I think I am." A local reporter had made her way inside, microphone in hand, but she was keeping a respectful distance. Wilson, their journalist brother-in-arms, was running interference, ensuring the story would be told right. "Staff Sergeant Connor," the reporter called softly, waiting for his acknowledgement before approaching. "Would you be willing to share your perspective on what happened here today?" Connor felt the familiar tension rise. Media attention had always been difficult since returning home. But Atlas pressed against his leg, and Martinez's steady presence across the table reminded him why this mattered. "This isn't about one veteran or one diner," he said, choosing his words carefully. "It's about recognition, understanding, about remembering that the battles don't always end when we come home." The reporter nodded, her eyes drawn to Atlas. "And your service dog? Could you explain his importance?" "Atlas is more than a dog," Connor replied, his hand automatically finding the familiar spot behind his partner's ears. "He's independence, dignity. He makes it possible for veterans like me to be part of civilian life again." Nearby conversations quieted as he spoke. Helen appeared with fresh coffee, her movements deliberately slow and calm as she refilled cups around Atlas. "What would you say to other businesses," the reporter asked, "about service animals and veterans? "That we're not asking for special treatment," Connor said. "Just the respect and rights we're guaranteed by law, and the chance to live the normal lives we fought to protect." The diner had grown quiet again, but this silence was different from the tense stillness of earlier. This was the silence of recognition, of understanding dawning across faces both military and civilian. Frank approached their table, his earlier arrogance replaced by genuine contrition. "Staff Sergeant," he said, holding out an envelope. "I wrote this. It's an apology and a promise to do better." Connor accepted the envelope with a nod. Around them, Marines watched with approval, not just at the apology, but at how their brother handled it with dignity. Helen cleared her throat. "If I could have everyone's attention." She waited until the diner fell silent. "Starting today, Murphy's isn't just a diner. We're going to be a safe space for veterans, a place where service dogs are always welcome, where those who served can find community." She smiled at Connor. "And where we remember that courage comes in many forms." The applause that followed wasn't the thunderous kind that demanded attention. It was respectful, understanding, the kind that acknowledged a quiet but significant change. As the morning wore on, Marines began to depart in small groups, each stopping to thank Helen, to pat Atlas, to remind Connor they were just a text away. The crowd outside gradually dispersed, but not before dozens of photos had been shared, stories exchanged, connections made. Connor remained at his table, finishing his coffee. Atlas lay at his feet, alert but relaxed. Across the diner, a new sign was being hung: "All who served welcome here." Simple words, but they represented something profound, a small battle won, a change made, a bridge built between military and civilian life. "Ready to head out?" Martinez asked, standing to leave. Connor looked around one last time, at Helen proudly adjusting the new sign, at Frank earnestly studying a pamphlet on service animals, at the mix of uniforms and civilian clothes that now seemed so natural together. "Yeah," he said, rising. Atlas stood with him, ready as always. "Mission accomplished. By noon, the morning's events at Murphy's Diner had taken on a life of their own. The elderly couple's Facebook post had gone viral, shared thousands of times. Local news stations ran the footage on repeat. 35 Marines in dress blues, moving with quiet purpose to support one of their own. Connor sat in his apartment, Atlas at his feet, watching his phone light up with notifications. The hashtag #StandWithVeterans was trending locally, then regionally. Videos from different angles showed the Marines' arrival, Helen's speech, the transformation of a moment of discrimination into something powerful. "You might want to see this," Martinez texted, followed by a link to a veterans support group page. Dozens of stories were pouring in, other veterans sharing similar experiences with their service dogs, their PTSD, their struggles to reintegrate. "This is bigger than us now, brother," another text read. Connor's sister Katie called from Seattle. "James, you're all over my local news. Are you okay?" "I'm good," he replied, surprising himself by meaning it. Atlas raised his head at the sound of Connor's voice, always attuned to his emotional state. "Really good, actually. The way those Marines showed up for you." Katie's voice cracked. "Mum would have been so proud." Their mother had been gone 3 years now, missing Connor's return from his last tour by just months. She'd always told him that true strength wasn't in fighting battles, but in knowing which ones mattered. Wilson called next. "Local news wants to do a feature, not just about this morning. They want to talk about veteran reintegration, service dogs, the whole picture. You up for it?" Connor looked at Atlas, remembering the long journey they'd taken together, the nightmares, the anxiety, the slow process of learning to trust each other. "Yeah," he said, "if it helps others understand." His inbox filled with messages from veterans across the country. One from a former Army Ranger caught his attention. "Watched your Marines stand up today. Taking my service dog to the coffee shop that turned us away last week. Thanks for showing us how to fight this battle with dignity." Helen called mid-afternoon. "Staff Sergeant, you should see what's happening here. Veterans have been coming, in all day. Some with service dogs, some just to show support. Frank's been learning more about PTSD from a Vietnam vet who's been here 3 hours. Social media couldn't get enough of the story. Someone had caught the moment when the elderly veteran at the counter shook Connor's hand, the respect between generations of warriors clear in their bearing. Another clip showed Helen taking down the right to refuse service sign, set to stirring music. But it was the quiet moments that seemed to resonate most. Atlas's perfect behavior proving every wrong assumption wrong, the young waitress learning about her brother's similar struggles, Frank's transformation from opposition to understanding. Rodriguez sent a group message. "Check out the Chamber of Commerce page." Local businesses were posting their own service animals welcome signs, sharing training resources, announcing veteran discounts. The ripple effect was becoming a wave. A veterans advocacy group reached out, asking Connor to speak at their next event. A service dog training organization wanted to feature Atlas in their educational materials. A local councilman proposed updating the city's business license training to include better coverage of ADA regulations and veteran support. "See what you started?" Martinez messaged. "All because you decided not to fight this one alone." Connor sat with that thought, scratching. Atlas behind the ears. The dog had been his lifeline, his way back to the world. Now, somehow, they were helping others find their way too. His phone buzzed with another message. A young Marine from that morning. "Sir, my uncle has PTSD. Been trying to convince him to get a service dog. After today, he's finally willing to consider it. Thank you." Outside his apartment window, the afternoon sun caught on something shiny. A store across the street was putting up a new sign. "Proud supporter of our veterans." Simple words, but they meant something different now. They meant change was possible, that bridges could be built, that some battles could be won with dignity instead of force. Atlas stretched and sat up, his training collar jingling softly. Time for their afternoon walk. Connor smiled, realizing that for the first time in years, he was looking forward to being out in public. Today had shown him that he wasn't just a veteran with PTSD and a service dog. He was part of something larger, a brotherhood that extended beyond the Marines, a movement toward understanding, a chance to make a difference. "Ready for a walk, boy?" he asked. Atlas's tail wagged once, professionally restrained but earnest. Together, they headed out into a community that felt just a little more like home. The media coverage hit national networks by evening. Connor watched from his living room as the story spread, each retelling highlighting different aspects: the Marines' solidarity, the service dog discrimination, the power of peaceful protest, the community's transformation. "Joining us now is Staff Sergeant James Connor," the anchor announced. Connor sat straight in his chair for the remote interview, Atlas positioned perfectly beside him. The training they'd both received showed in every movement. "Staff Sergeant, what made you decide to reach out to your unit this morning?" Connor paused, considering. "Honestly, I didn't want to at first. Military training teaches us to handle things ourselves, but sometimes the bravest thing you can do is ask for help." The interview cut to footage from Murphy's diner. Marines in dress blues filing in with quiet purpose, Helen taking down the old sign, veterans gathering outside. Each image told part of a larger story. "Your actions have inspired others," the anchor continued. "We're seeing reports of similar demonstrations across the country. What's your response to that?" "This was never about one veteran or one diner," Connor replied, feeling Atlas's reassuring pressure against his leg. "It's about recognition, understanding, about making sure every veteran knows they're not fighting their battles alone." After the interview, Martinez called. "Looking sharp on TV, brother, but you won't believe what's happening at base." The commanding officer had ordered mandatory training on service animal regulations and veteran support. More significantly, he'd authorized the formation of a veteran outreach program with Connor's unit taking the lead. "They want us to help other businesses learn how to properly welcome veterans with service dogs," Martinez explained. "Your story opened some important doors." The hashtag Stand with Veterans had gone national. Veterans across the country were sharing their own experiences, both good and bad, with service dogs in public spaces. Business organizations were pledging to improve their policies. Service dog training programs reported surges in applications. Helen called again. "Staff, Sergeant, I need your advice. We're setting up that monthly veteran support group, but it's grown bigger than expected. The VA wants to get involved, maybe make it a model for other communities." Even Frank had found his purpose. He'd spent the afternoon learning from a service dog trainer, then volunteered to help create training materials for other restaurants. "I was wrong," he admitted in a local news interview. "Sometimes it takes a wake-up call to see your own prejudices." Connor's inbox filled with messages from veterans considering service dogs, from business owners wanting to improve their policies, from community leaders seeking guidance. The story had struck a chord that resonated beyond their small corner. "Of America. You've started something important," Wilson told him. "People are finally paying attention to the challenges veterans face after coming home." A major veterans organization reached out, asking Connor to speak at their national convention. They wanted him to share not just the story of that morning at the diner, but the larger narrative about transition, about healing, about bridging the gap between military and civilian life. "Your story reminds us that not all battles are fought with weapons," their invitation read. "Sometimes the most important victories come from standing together, from changing hearts and minds." Atlas remained steady through it all, his training and dedication a constant reminder of why this mattered. Each interview, each speaking request, each shared story validated what Connor had known all along, that service dogs weren't just pets, they were lifelines, partners, bridges back to the world. Local businesses continued to change. The chamber, of Commerce launched a veteran-friendly business certification program. The City Council began discussing updates to their business licensing requirements, ensuring better understanding of ADA regulations and service animal accommodations. "Remember when you thought asking for help was a sign of weakness?" Martinez texted one evening. "Look what happened when you finally let your brothers have your back." Connor sat with that thought, watching the sunset from his apartment window. Atlas dozed nearby, his presence as natural as breathing now. Outside, a group of veterans walked past, heading to the newly established support group at Murphy's. One had a service dog, walking with the same quiet dignity that Atlas showed. The world was changing, one small step at a time, not through a force or confrontation, but through understanding, through brotherhood, through the kind of courage it took to stand up and say, "This matters. We matter, and together we can make a difference." "You know what, boy?" Connor said to Atlas, who perked up at his voice. "Mom was right. The most important battles are the ones that change hearts." Atlas's tail wagged once, professionally restrained but heartfelt, as if agreeing that sometimes the quietest victories were the most profound. Tuesday evening found Connor at his regular PTSD support group, but something was different. Instead of his usual spot near the exit, he sat closer to the center of the circle. Atlas settled beside his chair, ever vigilant but relaxed. "I see. Some new faces tonight," Dr. Sarah Chen, the group facilitator, noted. The room was fuller than usual. News of Connor's stand at the diner had drawn others out of isolation. Would anyone like to start? Connor surprised himself by raising his hand. 3 years of attending, and he'd never spoken first. "This past week changed something for me," he began. The others leaned in, many having seen his story on the news. "For so long, I thought strength meant handling everything alone. Kept thinking if I just tried harder, pushed through." He paused, feeling Atlas's reassuring pressure against his leg. But watching those Marines walk into that diner, not to fight, just to stand with me, it reminded me of something we knew in combat. The real strength is in standing together. A younger veteran across the circle nodded. She'd brought her service dog for the first time tonight, encouraged by Connor's example. "I've been scared to take Shadow out in public," she admitted, worried about the looks, the questions, the judgment. "I used to feel the same way about Atlas," Connor replied. "But he's not just a tool for managing PTSD, he's proof that it's okay to need help, to do things differently." Dr. Chen smiled gently. "That's a powerful realization, James. How has this affected other areas of your life?" Connor thought about the changes of the past week, the interviews he'd done, the veterans he'd spoken with, the community that had rallied around their cause. But more than that, he thought about the smaller changes. "I slept through the night twice this week," he said. "First time in months. And yesterday, when a car backfired outside Murphy's, I didn't freeze. Atlas did his job, but I also heard Martinez's voice in my head, felt the support of my unit, like I wasn't facing it alone anymore." Others shared similar experiences. A Vietnam vet talked about finally letting his family understand his struggles. A young Army sergeant described taking her service dog to the mall for the first time. Each story built on the others, creating a tapestry of healing and hope. After the meeting, Dr. Chen pulled Connor aside. "You've inspired a lot of people, James, not just with what happened at the diner, but with how you've handled everything since." Connor watched the others leaving, noting how they walked taller, spoke more freely. The younger veteran was exchanging numbers with another handler, their service dogs maintaining professional distance, but clearly aware of each other. "I'm not sure I did anything special," he said. "You showed them it's okay to be visible," Dr. Chen replied. "To stand up, to ask for help, to let others stand with you, that's more powerful than you know." Later that night, unable to sleep, Connor sat at his kitchen table reviewing his journal, another tool Dr. Chen had suggested years ago. His entries had changed over the past week. Instead of just tracking symptoms and triggers, he found himself writing about connections, about purpose, about hope. Atlas padded over, resting his head on Connor's knee. The gesture, once just a trained response to anxiety, now felt like a conversation between partners. "What do you think, boy?" Connor scratched behind the dog's ears. "Are we really making a difference?" His phone buzzed. A message from the young veteran with Shadow. "Thank you for group tonight." Took Shadow to the grocery store afterward. First time ever. An employee even remembered the story from the diner and helped us shop. Small steps, right? Connor smiled, adding another entry to his journal. 3 years ago, he'd written about surviving. 2 years ago, about coping. Now he was writing about living, about connecting, about helping others find their way back. Atlas's collar jingled as he shifted, always alert but no longer tense. They'd both changed, grown stronger together. The nightmares hadn't stopped. The hypervigilance hadn't disappeared, but they weren't defining him anymore. They were just part of his story. A story that somehow was helping others write their own. "Small steps," he wrote in his journal. "But we're not taking them alone anymore." Helen Murphy stood before the Chamber of Commerce meeting, her posture reflecting a new sense of purpose. The conference room was packed, local business owners eager to learn from Murphy's diner's transformation. "A week ago, I thought I ran a good business," she began. "Today, I know we can all do better." Behind her, a projection showed the diner's new policy document, with Frank standing nearby, ready to share their experience. Connor sat in the back with Atlas, still amazed at how their private moment of confrontation had sparked such widespread change. The Chamber's president had specifically requested their presence, saying, "Sometimes people need to see what they're working toward." Frank stepped forward, his transformation from skeptic to advocate evident in his bearing. "I was wrong about service animals, about veterans with PTSD, about a lot of things, but being wrong gave us a chance to get it right." He clicked to the next slide, a comprehensive training program developed with local veteran organizations. "We're calling it Open Doors, Open Hearts. Every business that completes the training gets certified as veteran-friendly." The questions came rapidly. How to identify legitimate service animals, what accommodations were required by law, how to handle customers who might be uncomfortable. Frank and Helen answered each one, their week of intensive learning evident in their responses. "The law is clear," Frank explained, pointing to the ADA guidelines, "but this isn't just about laws. It's about creating spaces where everyone feels welcome, where dignity isn't something you have to fight for." A restaurant owner raised her hand. "What about customers who are afraid of dogs?" Connor stood, Atlas moving smoothly with him. "May I?" Helen nodded, stepping aside. "Service dogs are trained to be nearly invisible," he explained. "Atlas maintains position, doesn't interact with other customers, stays focused on his job. The training isn't just about tasks, it's about public behavior." As if to demonstrate, Atlas remained perfectly positioned despite the room's attention. Several business owners nodded appreciatively. "We've actually seen our business increase," Helen added. "People appreciate knowing we're a place that cares, that makes an effort to understand." The chamber president stood. "That's why we're making this official." She unveiled a new window decal, Veteran-Friendly Business Certified, in bold letters. "Every business that completes the training gets one. We're also adding it to our online directory." Frank shared their new employee training manual, the product of collaboration with veteran groups and service dog organizations. "We've included real scenarios, proper responses, how to handle various situations. But most importantly, we've included perspectives from veterans themselves." The manual's first page showed a photo from that morning at the diner, Marines in dress blues, standing with quiet dignity. Below it, a simple quote: "Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is welcome each other home." A coffee shop owner spoke up. "I have a veteran employee who's been struggling. Never mentioned PTSD, but maybe this is why. How do we create a supportive environment without singling people out?" Helen smiled. That's actually chapter 3 in the manual. We've learned it's about creating a culture of understanding, making support available without forcing anyone to ask for it. The meeting continued, business owners sharing concerns, asking questions, offering suggestions. Connor watched as problems found practical solutions, as fear and uncertainty gave way to understanding and commitment. A local bank manager announced they were installing quiet spaces in every branch. A movie theater owner described new training for handling service dogs during films. A grocery store chain committed to having veterans on staff to help other veterans navigate shopping with service animals. This is how real change happens, the chamber president concluded. Not through mandates, but through community, through understanding, through choosing to do better once we know better. After the meeting, business owners lingered, asking Connor and Atlas to demonstrate proper interaction protocols. Frank handed out training schedules, while Helen coordinated with other restaurants about implementing similar programs. Never thought I'd be teaching people about service dogs, Frank mused to Connor. Amazing how life changes when you open your mind. Connor watched Atlas maintain his perfect downstay, a living example of what they were working toward. Sometimes the biggest changes started with the smallest moments of understanding. Sometimes the most important victories weren't won through force, but through the quiet power of dignity, respect, and the willingness to learn. The chamber president approached with the first official certification decal. For Murphy's Diner, she said, for showing us all a better way. Helen accepted it with tears in her eyes, then handed it to Frank. Would you do the honors? You've earned it. As Frank carefully placed the decal in the diner's window, Connor felt another piece of the civilian world become more accessible, more welcoming. Another bridge built, another door opened, another step toward making welcome home mean something real. Saturday afternoon found Connor's apartment full of Marines, the kind of gathering that would have been impossible for him just weeks ago. Atlas moved calmly through the crowd, his training allowing him to maintain his duties while adapting to the unusual circumstances. Martinez stood at the grill on Connor's small balcony, expertly flipping burgers while telling stories from their last deployment. The unit's old photo album lay open on the coffee table, its pages worn from frequent handling. Remember this one? Rodriguez pointed to a photo of their squad outside a makeshift gym in Fallujah. Connor trying to teach us proper push-up form, like some drill instructor. Had to, Connor replied, smiling at the memory. Your form was terrible, all of you. Still got us through the firefight next day, Martinez called from the balcony. Connor's training always did. Wilson picked up another photo, the unit gathering after a particularly rough mission. This was the day we really became brothers, he said quietly. Not just Marines, family. The room sobered slightly, remembering. Atlas sensed the shift in energy and pressed against Connor's leg, providing his steady support. That's what last week at the diner was about, Martinez said, coming in from the balcony. Same brotherhood, different battlefield. Connor nodded, looking around at the faces of men who'd gone from fellow Marines to something deeper. They'd been there through firefights and fallen comrades, through nightmares and recoveries, through transitions back to civilian life, some smooth, some rocky. Speaking of brotherhood, Rodriguez said, pulling out his phone. Show them the numbers. Martinez grinned. After the diner, veteran support group attendance is up 200% across the county. Service dog applications have doubled. But here's the best part. Remember how Connor always said he didn't need help? Connor felt his face flush, but Martinez continued. Now, we've got veterans reaching out every day. Guys who've been isolating, struggling alone. They saw what brotherhood looks like and remembered, we never leave a Marine behind. The young Marine who'd asked about refusal of service during the diner incident spoke up. My uncle finally agreed to get help, he said. Seeing Staff Sergeant Connor with Atlas, seeing how the unit stood up, it showed him he wasn't alone. Photos continued circulating, Deployment shots mixed with newer ones from the diner, from veteran events, from quiet moments of support. The album told a story of brotherhood that evolved but never weakened. "You know what's funny?" Wilson mused, holding up a photo of their unit preparing for a mission. "We got all this attention for standing together at the diner, but that's just what we do. Been doing it since day one. Different uniform, same mission," Martinez agreed. "Take care of our own." Atlas shifted position as more Marines crowded around the photo album, maintaining his watchful presence while adapting to the social situation. His behavior reflected what Connor had been teaching other veterans, that strength could be quiet, that support could be constant without being intrusive. "Hey, Connor," Rodriguez called, holding up his phone. "Got another message from that veterans group in Seattle. They want to know if we'll help them set up something similar here. Veterans supporting veterans, showing businesses how to do better." Connor looked around his apartment, at the Marines who'd become family, at Atlas performing his duties with quiet dedication, at the mix of old and new photos showing a brotherhood that had evolved to meet new challenges. "Tell them yes," he said, "but tell them it's not just about veterans with service dogs. It's about all of us looking out for each other, about remembering what brotherhood really means." Martinez raised his beer. "To brotherhood," he said. On and off the battlefield, the toast echoed around the room, each Marine adding his voice. Atlas remained alert but calm, his presence a reminder of how far Connor had come, from isolating himself to hosting unit gatherings, from hiding his struggles to helping others face theirs. As the afternoon light softened, the conversations continued, war stories mixing with civilian triumphs, shared memories leading to plans for the future. Different uniform, different battlefield, but the same unshakable bond that had seen them through everything life had thrown their way. Brotherhood, Connor realized, watching his unit, his family, share another round of stories, didn't end when the fighting stopped. It just found new ways to show itself, new battles to fight, new victories to celebrate together. The city council chambers were packed beyond capacity. Connor sat in the front row, Atlas at his feet, surrounded by Marines in dress blues. Behind them, dozens of veterans with service dogs filled the seats, a visual testament to how much had changed in just a few weeks. Mayor Richardson stood at the podium, the chamber falling silent as she began. "Today, we're not just recognizing a single act of courage. We're acknowledging a movement that has transformed our community's understanding of what it means to welcome our veterans home." She gestured to a large screen showing footage from that morning at Murphy's Diner. "When these Marines stood together, they showed us that some battles are fought not with weapons, but with dignity, unity, and understanding." The resolution before the council was comprehensive. New training requirements for business licenses, funding for veteran support programs, official recognition of service dog rights. But it was more than legislation. It was a community's commitment to change. Helen Murphy took the podium next, her diner's transformation now a model for others. "A month ago, I thought I ran a good business," she said. "Today, I know that being good isn't enough. We need to be understanding, we need to be welcoming, we need to be better." Frank stood with her, the manager's transformation as remarkable as his diner's. "We've served over 200 veterans with service dogs since that morning," he reported. "Each one treated with the respect they deserve, each one welcomed without question." The young waitress who'd volunteered to coordinate training shared statistics: 50 businesses certified veteran-friendly, dozens more in progress, service dog applications up, veteran support group attendance growing. Real change, measured in real numbers. Martinez nudged Connor. "Not bad for a guy who didn't want to ask for help," he whispered. Connor smiled, remembering his reluctance to share his struggles. Atlas pressed against his leg, a reminder of how far they'd come together. The dog's behavior remained perfect despite the crowded chamber, proving again what proper training could achieve. A veteran rose to speak, his service dog maintaining position just like Atlas. Before Connor and his unit took their stand, I was afraid to take Sierra out in public, he said. Now, we're welcomed everywhere. People understand. They want to learn. The mayor presented official citations to Connor and Atlas, to the Marines who'd stood with them, to Helen and Frank for their commitment to change. But it was the next announcement that caught everyone's attention. The City Council has unanimously approved funding for a new Veterans Resource Center, Mayor Richardson declared. A place where service dogs can train, where veterans can find support, where businesses can learn to better serve those who served us. The applause was thunderous. Connor felt Atlas shift slightly, adjusting to the noise while maintaining his duties. They'd both learned to adapt, to trust, to accept support. When it was offered, a young Marine cadet in the audience raised her hand. "Staff Sergeant Connor," she said when recognized, "what would you tell other veterans who are struggling alone?" Connor stood, Atlas moving smoothly with him. The chamber quieted, waiting. "I'd tell them what my unit showed me," he said. "That strength isn't about fighting every battle alone. It's about standing together, about letting others stand with you." Martinez and the other Marines nodded. They'd lived this truth in combat. Now they were living it in peace. The mayor presented one final item, a proclamation declaring an annual Veterans Understanding and Support Day. "Let this be a reminder," she said, "that welcome home shouldn't just be words. It should be actions. It should be understanding. It should be change." As the ceremony concluded, Connor watched veterans and civilians mingling, sharing stories, building bridges. Business owners talked with service dog trainers. Marines connected with veterans from other eras. Understanding grew with each conversation. "You know what this means?" Martinez said quietly. "This isn't just about us anymore. This is about every veteran who comes after us, every service dog, every battle fought far from any battlefield." Connor looked around the chamber, at Atlas, performing his duties with quiet dignity, at Frank, proudly wearing his veteran-friendly business certification, at Marines and veterans standing together. "Yeah," he replied, "that's exactly what it's about." The mayor's words hung in the air. Welcome home shouldn't just be words. Thanks to one morning's stand for dignity, one unit's demonstration of brotherhood, one community's commitment to change, those words were finally becoming reality. The new Veterans Resource Center took shape over the following months, transforming an old community building into something extraordinary. Connor stood in what would become the main training area, Atlas by his side, watching volunteers install a special flooring designed for service dog training. "What do you think?" Martinez asked, reviewing the training manual they'd developed together. "Too detailed?" Connor shook his head, thumbing through pages that captured everything they'd learned. Not just regulations and procedures, but real experiences, real solutions, real understanding. "It's perfect," he said. "Wish we'd had something like this when I first got Atlas." The manual had evolved far beyond Helen and Frank's original diner guidelines. Now it was a comprehensive guide for businesses, organizations, and communities wanting to better serve veterans with service dogs. Every page reflected lessons learned, struggles overcome, bridges built. "Check this out," Rodriguez called from the conference room. He was setting up for tomorrow's first official training session. A dozen local businesses had signed up, eager to earn their veteran-friendly certification. The room's walls displayed before and after photos. Murphy's Diner featured prominently. The old Right to Refuse service sign contrasted with their new welcoming atmosphere. And the businesses showed similar transformations, each one a small victory in the larger battle for understanding. Frank arrived for his scheduled presentation practice, looking nervous but determined. Since that morning at the diner, he'd become one of their most effective advocates, his personal journey from opposition to understanding resonating with other business owners. "Still can't believe I'm doing this," he admitted, adjusting his tie. "That's exactly why you should," Connor replied. "You've lived both sides of it. You understand the change that's possible. They watched him practice his presentation, sharing his transformation from someone who feared service dogs to someone who championed their acceptance. Atlas lay quietly nearby, a living example of everything Frank described. The center's design incorporated everything they'd learned. Quiet spaces for veterans who needed them, wide hallways and clear sightlines for those with PTSD. Training. Areas where service dogs could practice their skills. Meeting rooms where support groups could gather. Got another call from Seattle, Martinez mentioned during a break. They're using our manual as a template for their own program. San Diego, too. What had started as one unit standing up for one veteran had become something larger, a model for communities across the country. The manual wasn't just about rules and regulations. It was about understanding, about seeing the person behind. The service dog, about recognizing that coming home wasn't always easy. Helen dropped by with lunch, her diner's new veteran-friendly menu featuring items that could be eaten one-handed. A small but thoughtful accommodation for handlers working with their dogs. She'd become a regular visitor, always eager to share. New ideas for making spaces more welcoming. Had 3 new veteran customers yesterday, she reported proudly. 2 with service dogs. Everyone knew exactly what to do. No questions, no stares, just respect. Connor watched her arrange the food, remembering that tense morning months ago. The same space that had once refused him service was now a model of inclusion, its transformation inspiring others to change. A group of veteran handlers arrived. For the afternoon's peer support session, their dogs settled seamlessly into working positions, demonstrating the very behaviors the manual described. Connor saw Atlas watching them, ever the professional, maintaining his own duties while adapting to the presence of other working dogs. "You know what this place really is?" Martinez asked later, as they watched the sun set through the center's windows. "It's a bridge between military and civilian life, between understanding and action, between where we were and where we need to be." Connor nodded, feeling the truth of it. The center wasn't just a building or a program. It was a testament to what could happen when people chose to learn, to understand, to do better, when brotherhood extended beyond uniform and service, becoming something larger. Atlas shifted positions, always attentive to Connor's needs while remaining aware of his surroundings. Their partnership had grown stronger through everything, each challenge met together, each victory shared. Now they were helping others find that same connection, that same path forward. "A bridge," Connor agreed, watching another veteran and handler team practice their skills in the training area. And every person who walks through those doors helps build it stronger. The bell above Murphy's diner chimed, just as it had that first morning, but everything else had changed. Connor and Atlas entered to welcoming smiles. The morning regulars now familiar with both veteran and service dog. The veteran's welcome sign caught the early light, its promise kept every day since that transformative morning. "Your usual spot, Staff Sergeant?" Frank asked, gesturing to a corner table with good sightlines and space for Atlas. The manager's transformation remained one of their greatest success stories, from opposition to understanding, from fear to advocacy. "Thanks, Frank," Connor replied, Atlas moving smoothly into position as they settled at the table. The diner had evolved in subtle but significant ways. Small signs on each table reminded customers about service dog etiquette. The menu now included a veteran's special, named by Helen in honor of that first morning. Even the layout had been adjusted to create better access for handlers and their dogs. "Coffee's already on," the young waitress, now the diner's official veteran liaison, called from behind the counter. She'd taken her role seriously, learning everything she could about supporting veteran customers and their service animals. The morning crowd included several regulars Connor recognized from the Veterans Resource Center, a Vietnam vet with his new service dog, still learning to work together but growing more confident each day. An Army sergeant who'd started bringing her dog in public after seeing Connor's story. Each one a small victory, a step toward normal life. "Mind if I join you?" Helen asked, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She'd made it her practice to sit with veteran customers when she could, learning from their experiences, always looking for ways to improve. "Please," Connor gestured to the empty chair. Atlas shifted slightly to accommodate the new presence while maintaining his working position. "Been quite a journey since that first morning," Helen said, watching another veteran enter with their service dog. The 2 dogs acknowledged each other professionally, then returned to their duties. "Sometimes I still can't believe how much has changed." The diner's walls told the story. Photos from that morning when the Marines arrived in dress blues. News clippings about their veteran-friendly certification program. A framed copy of the City Council resolution. But it was the smaller changes that meant the most. The quiet acceptance, the natural inclusion, the normal becoming truly normal. Frank approached with a plate of eggs and toast. "Try the new breakfast special," he said proudly. Designed it with one-handed eating in mind, for handlers working with their dogs. Connor sampled the food, appreciating the thoughtful modification. Atlas maintained his downstay, the picture of professional behavior that had helped change so many minds. "Had another business owner in yesterday," Helen mentioned. "Wanted to know how we made the transition." Frank spent an hour showing them our training materials. The diner had become more than just a restaurant. It was a model, a training ground, a success story that proved change was possible. The morning rush continued around them. Civilians and veterans, service dogs and customers, all sharing the same space with understanding and respect. "Remember how worried you were about coming back?" a voice asked. Connor looked up to see Martinez sliding into an empty chair, his own coffee in hand. "Now look at this place." They watched another veteran enter, service dog at heel, without prompting. Nearby customers shifted to create space, their movements natural, practiced, respectful. The transformation wasn't just in policies or procedures, it was in people's hearts and minds. "It's not just about the dogs anymore," Connor observed. "It's about understanding what coming home really means." Helen nodded, her eyes misting slightly. "My father would have loved this," she said, referring to her Marine dad, who'd struggled with his own invisible wounds. "A place where everyone knows how to welcome warriors home." Atlas shifted position, maintaining his duties while adapting to the social situation. His behavior remained a quiet testament to what proper training and understanding could achieve. The same professional excellence that had once drawn suspicion now earned respect and appreciation. "You know what I love most," Frank said, returning with fresh coffee. "It's not special anymore, it's just normal, the way it always should have been." Connor looked around the diner, at veterans and civilians sharing space and stories, at service dogs performing their duties without question or challenge, at the small but significant changes that had made welcome more than just a word. This was the real victory, he realized. Not the proclamations or programs, but these quiet, morning moments where everyone belonged, where understanding had replaced fear, where coming home meant exactly what it should. The blueprints for the expanded Veterans Resource Center covered Connor's kitchen table, Atlas watching attentively as Connor and Martinez reviewed the plans. What had started in a converted community building was growing into something more ambitious. "The city approved the funding yesterday," Martinez said, pointing to the new wing's design. "Service dog training facility, expanded meeting spaces, even a coffee shop modeled after Murphy's." The original center had proven too small. Within months, veterans from neighboring counties made the drive just to find the understanding and support they'd heard about. Now, with state funding and private donations, they were building something that could serve as a model nationwide. "Look at this." Connor traced a section of the blueprint. "Indoor training area with different environmental settings. Helps dogs and handlers prepare for real-world situations." The design incorporated everything they'd learned. Quiet spaces for veterans still, adjusting to civilian life, wide corridors with clear sightlines. areas where service dogs could practice their skills in realistic settings, from restaurant seating to public transportation simulations. Got another call from the VA, Martinez mentioned, pulling out his phone. They want to use our training program as a template for their facilities nationwide. Said they've never seen better results with veteran reintegration. The statistics backed it up. Veterans with service dogs reported higher community engagement, better emotional regulation, decreased isolation. Businesses that completed their training program showed increased veteran customer bases and improved customer satisfaction overall. Atlas perked up at a knock on the door. Rodriguez entered, carrying fresh data from their latest community impact study. "You're going to want to see these numbers," he said, spreading papers across the blueprints. "Veteran unemployment in our area down 15%, community engagement up 40%. Even emergency mental health calls have decreased." Connor studied the figures, remembering his own journey from isolation to engagement. Atlas pressed against his leg, a reminder of how far they'd come together. "Here's the best part," Rodriguez continued. "Other cities are noticing. Got requests for program information from 12 states just this week. The expansion plans went beyond just physical space. They were developing online training modules, consultation services, support networks that could reach veterans wherever they were." "Remember that Army sergeant who was afraid to take her dog shopping?" Martinez asked. "She's leading our peer support program now, running training sessions for new handlers." The transformation rippled outward. Veterans helping veterans. Businesses teaching businesses. A community learning that welcome meant more than just words. Wilson arrived next, fresh from a meeting with the mayor's office. "City council's talking about making us a regional hub for veteran services. They want to fund satellite centers in surrounding counties." The blueprint's scope suddenly seemed small compared to the real changes happening around them. Every week brought news stories of veterans finding their way back to community life, of businesses learning to be truly welcoming, of bridges being built between military and civilian worlds. "Got something else to show you," Rodriguez said, pulling up a video on his phone. It showed a young veteran entering a local shopping mall with his new service dog, moving confidently through crowds that parted respectfully, understanding without needing to be told. "That's what it's all about," Connor said quietly. Atlas shifted closer, ever attentive to his tone. "Making it normal. Making it right." The future was taking shape not just in blueprints and programs, but in changed minds and opened hearts. Each small victory, a veteran shopping without fear, a business welcoming service dogs without question, a community understanding what support really meant, built momentum for bigger changes. "You know what this means?" Martinez gestured to everything spread across the table. "We're not just helping veterans anymore. We're changing how communities think about welcome, about support, about what it means to come home." Connor looked at the plans, the statistics, the evidence of real change. Atlas sat alert beside him, both of them ready for whatever came next. The future wasn't just about buildings or programs. It was about continuing to build bridges, one understanding, heart at a time. 1 year to the day after that transformative morning, Connor and Atlas approached Murphy's diner in the early dawn light. The anniversary hadn't been publicized. They'd all agreed that true change shouldn't need ceremony, but somehow people knew. Veterans and their service dogs had been arriving since sunrise, quietly taking seats throughout the diner. Marines from Connor's unit, some driving hours to be there, filtered in wearing civilian clothes, but carrying themselves with military bearing. The scene was both different from and similar to that first morning. The same location, but a wholly transformed reality. "Welcome home, Staff Sergeant," Frank greeted them at the door, the words now carrying the weight of genuine understanding. The manager who had once turned them away now stood as one of their strongest advocates, his own transformation a testament to the power of education and understanding. Inside, Helen moved among the tables, greeting veterans by name, knowing their stories, their struggles, their victories. The diner hummed with quiet conversation and the occasional clink of coffee cups. Service dogs lay professionally at their handlers' feet, their presence no longer remarkable but simply normal, exactly as it should be. "Hard to believe it's been a year," Martinez said, joining Connor at what had become his regular table. Atlas settled into his working position, ever vigilant but relaxed in the familiar environment. Connor surveyed the scene, noting how naturally veterans and civilians shared the space, how easily new handlers were welcomed, how smoothly the staff accommodated service dogs. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday," he replied. Other times it feels like another world," Martinez finished. They both knew he wasn't just talking about the diner. The bell above the door chimed as a young veteran entered hesitantly, a new service dog at his side. Connor recognized the look. He'd worn it himself once, the mix of determination and anxiety that came with first ventures into public spaces. Without fanfare or fuss, the diner's practiced choreography unfolded. Frank appeared with a quiet welcome and guidance to a suitable table. Nearby, customers adjusted their seats to create clear paths. Helen approached with the specially designed menu and gentle orientation to their veteran-friendly features. The young veteran's tension visibly eased as he realized where he was, what this place meant. His service dog maintained perfect position, both of them finding their footing in this safe harbor of understanding. "That's what it's all about," Connor said softly. Atlas pressed against his leg, their partnership as strong as ever, making it easier for those who come after us. The morning light strengthened, catching on the frame news article that told their story. But the real story was in the quiet moments unfolding around them. Veterans helping veterans, civilians and service members sharing space and understanding. A community that had learned what welcome truly meant. Rodriguez arrived with the latest numbers from the Veterans Resource Center. Thousands of businesses trained, hundreds of veterans supported, dozens of communities implementing their program. But the statistics couldn't capture the real change. The confidence in a new handler's step, the ease in a veteran's smile, the natural acceptance in a civilian's greeting. "You know what today really marks?" Helen asked, joining them with fresh coffee. "Not just the anniversary of that morning. It's about all the mornings since, all the veterans who found their way back, all the minds and hearts that opened to understanding." Through the windows, they could see the Veterans Resource Center down the street, its expanded facilities a hub of activity even at this early hour. Service dogs trained there, veterans found support there, businesses learned there. But the real work happened in places like this. Ordinary spaces made extraordinary by simple understanding. The young veteran with the new service dog caught Connor's eye, recognition dawning. "You're the one," he said. "The one who started all this." Connor shook his head. "We all started this," he replied, gesturing to the Marines scattered throughout. The diner, to Frank arranging tables, to Helen greeting another veteran, to Atlas maintaining his quiet vigilance. Every person who chose to learn, to understand, to do better. That's what makes the difference. The morning sun filled the diner now, touching each face, each story, each moment of quiet victory. Outside, the city was waking up, moving forward, but carrying with it the lessons learned here, that welcome isn't just a word, that understanding isn't just a concept, that home isn't just a place. Atlas shifted slightly, alerting Connor to his rising emotions. Even now, their partnership continued to grow, to adapt, to show others what was possible. 1 year ago, they'd stood in this same spot, faced with rejection. Today, they sat surrounded by the proof that change was possible, that dignity could prevail, that bridges could be built between the worlds they'd all once thought forever separated. The bell chimed again, welcome ready for whoever entered next.